Jane Fonda.
One of Hollywood's most exciting new stars.
There's a lot of hostility towards you.
Would you have done anything differently?
Jane Fonda is one of the most celebrated women in Hollywood, an Oscar-winning actress, an activist, and a cultural force for more than half a century. But the start of her career? That didn't come from a casting call or years of struggling in obscurity. It came from her father, Henry Fonda, a Hollywood giant who made one call and opened the door. Jane didn't pretend otherwise. At 83, she finally said it out loud. In this video, we'll investigate the quotes, the moments, and the truth behind how Jane Fonda's career began and how she turned privilege into purpose. Over the years, Jane Fonda has never shied away from honesty. In one recent interview, she said plainly, "It's a given that it helps. People notice you because of your name." She also added, "You do wonder if people hire you just because of who your mother or father is, or resent you because of it." These weren't defensive comments. They were reflective. She acknowledged that her name got her in. But staying in, that was a different story. "I had to prove myself," she said, "to myself, to everyone." The pressure of being Henry Fonda's daughter wasn't just about privilege. It was about expectation, the kind that follows you into every room, every set, every scene. Before Jane Fonda ever appeared in a film, her father had already carved out one of the most respected careers in American cinema. Henry Fonda was born in Nebraska in 1905. He didn't come from show business. He was the son of a printer and had no early interest in acting. His path to the stage was almost accidental. A friend invited him to help backstage at a local community theater. One night he stepped into a role and never looked back. In the 1920s, Fonda moved to the East Coast and became part of the University Players, a theater group in Massachusetts. He performed alongside rising names like James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan, his first wife. By the 1930s, he had made his way to Broadway, and his subtle, thoughtful acting style stood out. It wasn't long before Hollywood took notice. His film debut came in The Farmer Takes a Wife in 1935, which was quickly followed by leading roles in films like You Only Live Once, 1937, and Jezebel, 1938. Henry brought a quiet intensity to the screen and quickly became known for playing principled, morally upright characters. In 1940, he starred as Tom Joad in The Grapes of Wrath, a performance that earned him his first Academy Award nomination and solidified his place as a serious actor. By the early 1940s, Henry Fonda wasn't just a working actor, he was a symbol of integrity and dignity in American film. When Jane was born in 1937, her father was already a star, and by the time she was old enough to consider acting herself, the Fonda name carried real weight in every studio, on every set, in every room. While Henry Fonda was rising in Hollywood, Francis Ford Seymour lived in a world of elegance, wealth, and quiet pressure. Born in 1908 in Brockville, Ontario, Frances was raised in an upper-class Canadian family. Her upbringing was privileged but restrained, the kind of life built on image, appearances, and silence. She married millionaire lawyer and sportsman George Tuttle Brokaw, a member of New York's elite, and had a daughter with him, Frances de Villers Brokaw. After Brokaw's death, Frances remained in high society circles until she met a man from a different world, Henry Fonda. They met in 1936 at a party in Beverly Hills. Frances was stylish, intelligent, and refined. Henry was reserved, intense, and freshly divorced from actress Margaret Sullivan. The attraction was immediate. They married that same year. Jane was born in 1937, followed by Peter in 1940. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect Hollywood family. But inside the home, it was anything but. Frances struggled privately with depression and mental illness, issues rarely acknowledged at the time, especially among society women. According to Jane, her mother was emotionally fragile and lived in a state of quiet desperation. In her memoir, My Life So Far, Jane wrote, "My mother tried to be what she thought a good wife was supposed to be, but she was terrified of being abandoned. She was never able to be her true self." Her mental health deteriorated over the years, and in 1950, Frances was admitted to Craig House, a psychiatric hospital in New York. While institutionalized, she died by suicide. Jane was told it was a heart attack. She didn't learn the truth until reading a magazine article years later. In a later interview, Jane said, "I think my mother died of loneliness." That loss, coupled with the emotional distance of her father, would deeply affect Jane's identity, her sense of self-worth, and ultimately, her decision to pursue acting. In many ways, her mother's silence became one of Jane's greatest motivators to speak out. Jane Fonda was born in New York City in 1937, into a world of fame, formality, and emotional distance. And if you are into classic Hollywood icons, amazing stories, and newly discovered insights, then hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers, and your support will mean a lot to our channel. As a child, she lived in the shadow of two legacies: the polished grace of her mother and the towering reputation of her father. Her father wasn't the kind of Hollywood star who embraced public glamour. Henry Fonda was serious, introverted, and reserved, especially at home. Jane later said he didn't talk much. He wasn't cruel, but he was emotionally inaccessible. She grew up feeling unseen, craving approval from a man who rarely gave praise. Yet, despite the emotional gap, Henry's career loomed large. Jane was surrounded by the business from a young age. The family moved between New York and Los Angeles, and Jane spent time on movie sets, backstage at theaters, and around famous actors and directors. She later described her childhood world as being filled with movie stars and silence. Even though Henry didn't encourage her to act at first, she watched him closely, studying the way he carried himself, how he prepared for roles, and how others responded to him. It wasn't admiration, not yet. It was distance, fascination, and the need to earn his respect. Jane once said, "I wanted his attention. I thought maybe if I became successful, he'd see me." Acting didn't come to her as a dream. It came as a possible bridge, a way to close the emotional gap between herself and her father. And eventually, that gap became the very foundation of her ambition. From the outside, Jane Fonda's childhood looked like a dream. Hollywood parties, red carpet premieres, and a last name that opened doors. She grew up surrounded by celebrities. Her father worked with icons like James Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, and John Ford. Famous faces were constant, not occasional. Jane later said, "I didn't know any plumbers or dentists. I only knew movie stars." But this world didn't make her feel special. It made her feel small. She wasn't drawn to the fame. In fact, she often felt like she was looking in from the outside, even in her own home. They were shiny on the outside, she once said, but unreachable. Her father's stardom cast a long shadow, one that left little space for vulnerability or emotional closeness. But while she may have felt invisible at times, she also knew something important. Just by being born into that world, she already had a foot in the door. Connections, recognition, the Fonda name. Whether she liked it or not, that legacy meant people would pay attention the moment she stepped into a room. The challenge wasn't getting noticed. The challenge would be proving she deserved to be there. Jane Fonda grew up in a world most people only see on screen. Her father, Henry Fonda, was a Hollywood giant. The people who filled their home were not neighbors or family friends, they were icons. "I didn't know any plumbers or dentists," Jane said. "I only knew movie stars." But being surrounded by fame didn't make her feel glamorous. It made her feel like an outsider, observing a performance she wasn't part of. Then came a moment she would never forget. One afternoon in Malibu, teenage Jane was swimming nude in her father's pool when someone called out, "Garbo's here!" Greta Garbo, the most mysterious, revered actress of Hollywood's golden age, had arrived. Jane quickly ducked down and peeked out from the pool's edge. She saw Garbo, dressed in a baggy one-piece swimsuit, a floppy hat pulled low over her face. Then Garbo disappeared to change. When she returned, she was wearing a bathrobe and a white rubber swimming cap. The two of them walked toward the water together. Jane, stunned, tried to stay calm. And then, without a word, Garbo dropped her bathrobe. She was naked, Jane recalled. What shocked her even more wasn't the nudity. It was the reality of what she saw. She wasn't perfect. She was an athlete. She was muscular. She was sturdy, Jane said. It made me so happy that she was just a good, healthy body. In that moment, Garbo became human. Not a myth, not a goddess, just a woman. As they swam together, Garbo turned to her and asked, "Do you want to be an actress?" Jane said no. Garbo looked at her and replied, "Well, you're pretty enough." Jane was stunned. I think I had a Cheshire grin on my face for the rest of the day. That unexpected afternoon didn't just give Jane a story, it gave her a lesson, a new understanding of beauty, strength, and identity. My more mature, smarter part of my brain knew there were a lot of very beloved, wonderful, fabulous women who weren't perfect, Jane said. But it took me a long, long time to realize we are not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be whole. In a life surrounded by image, that swim with Garbo gave her something rare, authenticity. And while she hadn't yet decided to act, she already knew this much. She had access, opportunity, and a last name that meant something. The Fonda name gave her a foot in the door, but wholeness, that would be something she'd have to earn for herself. For years after that moment with Greta Garbo, Jane Fonda still wasn't sure she wanted to be an actress. She had the access, the name, the background, but not the confidence. After high school, she drifted. She studied art. She modeled. She lived in Paris. Acting didn't come to her as a passion. It came as a question. Who do I need to become to be seen? Eventually, she decided to train seriously. She enrolled at the Actors Studio in New York under the legendary Lee Strasberg. Strasberg saw something in her. He said I had talent, Jane recalled. That was the first time anyone had ever told me that. But getting into the right rooms, getting those early chances, still required a push. That's where her father came in. Jane Fonda has since acknowledged that her father's name opened doors she couldn't have accessed on her own. At age 83, she reflected, "It's a given that it helps. People notice you because of your name." Henry Fonda used his reputation to help arrange her first real opportunities, including introductions to directors and casting agents who were eager, or at least curious, to see what his daughter could do. Jane later admitted, "You do wonder if people hire you just because of who your father is, or resent you because of it." Her first film role came in Tall Story, 1960, opposite Anthony Perkins, a romantic comedy that wouldn't win awards, but did one very important thing. It put Jane Fonda on the screen. And from that point forward, she knew she would have to prove that she was more than a surname. She had entered the industry through the side door, but staying in would be entirely up to her. Before Jane Fonda ever appeared in a film, her first serious step into acting came not in Hollywood, but on stage. And it wasn't just any stage. It was alongside her father. In 1954, a 17-year-old Jane performed with Henry Fonda in a production of The Country Girl at the Omaha Community Playhouse, the very same theater where Henry himself had gotten his start decades earlier. For Jane, it was a chance to be near her father in a new way, not as a child in his shadow, but as a performer by his side. For Henry, it was more than just a bonding moment. It was the first time he used his influence directly to launch his daughter's path. He helped get her on the playbill. He encouraged her to take the stage. He put her in front of an audience not because she was ready, but because he wanted to give her a start. That's where the door opened. Jane later admitted, "My father got me into the business." That stage experience gave her a sense of what performance could be. The rhythm of live theater, the adrenaline of being watched, the possibility of expression. But it also planted something deeper, a hunger to be more than Henry Fonda's daughter. Acting for the first time wasn't just about attention, it was about proving something. Proving she belonged, proving she had something to say. That performance would lead to more acting classes, a move to New York, and eventually her first film role. But it all started with her father's name and the power he chose to use on her behalf. Jane Fonda's entry into film wasn't subtle. After her stage experience with her father and training at the Actors Studio, she landed her first movie role in Tall Story, 1960, opposite Anthony Perkins. The reviews were mixed. Some saw potential. Others saw only her last name. "People thought I got the role because I was Henry Fonda's daughter," Jane later said. And they were right. That truth followed her into every audition. Every headline that read Fonda's daughter was a reminder. People saw her as a product of privilege, not a talent in her own right. Critics questioned her range. Industry insiders whispered that she was coasting on her family name. Jane knew it, and she hated it. "You do wonder if people hire you just because of who your father is," she said, "or resent you because of it." Instead of retreating, she leaned in. She kept working, kept training, took roles that challenged her. By the mid-1960s, she was starring in high-profile films like Cat Ballou, 1965, Barefoot in the Park, 1967, and Barbarella, 1968. Barbarella made her a sex symbol, but also brought her closer to being typecast. So she pivoted again. She sought out dramatic roles. She demanded to be taken seriously. And in 1971, it paid off. Her performance in Clute earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress. The same critics who once dismissed her now had to admit Jane Fonda wasn't just Henry Fonda's daughter anymore. She was a serious actress, a rising force, and she wasn't finished yet. While Jane Fonda was building a powerful career on screen, her private life was unfolding with just as many twists, transformations, and emotional battles. In 1965, at age 27, Jane married French director Roger Vadim, the man who would direct her in Barbarella 3 years later. Their relationship was bold, bohemian, and often chaotic. In 1968, they had a daughter, Vanessa Vadim. Jane later described their marriage as shaped by his control and infidelity, a dynamic that left her feeling diminished even as her fame grew. They divorced in 1973. That same year, Jane married political activist Tom Hayden, one of the most visible figures of the anti-Vietnam War movement. Together, they took on political causes head-on, and in 1973, they welcomed their son, Troy Garrity, named after the Black Panther leader Bobby Seale, but given Jane's mother's maiden name to avoid press attention. Their life was filled with activism, community organizing, and public scrutiny. But over time, the relationship wore thin. Jane and Hayden divorced in 1990. In 1991, she married media mogul Ted Turner, the founder of CNN. Their marriage was intense and high-profile. Ted was charismatic but dominating, and their differing values began to clash. Jane left the marriage in 2001, saying she had lost herself in trying to keep up with him. Through these chapters, Jane evolved constantly as a wife, a mother, an activist, and a public figure. But no relationship shaped her or haunted her more than the one with her father. Henry Fonda was one of the most respected actors of his generation, but at home he was distant, formal, and emotionally shut off. Jane spent decades chasing his approval. "He never said he was proud of me, not once," she said. And that haunted me. She tried to connect with him through acting. even choosing the same profession, hoping it might bring them closer. But for most of her life, the silence remained. That is, until 1981, when they finally shared the screen in On Golden Pond, his final film, and the closest Jane ever came to truly reaching him. In 1981, Jane Fonda made what would become the most personal and emotionally complex film of her career, On Golden Pond. It was the first and only time she would share the screen with her father, Henry Fonda, and it was his final film before his death. Jane bought the rights to the play herself, specifically so they could do it together. She had a reason. "I wanted to do this film with him because it mirrored our relationship," Jane said. In the movie, they play father and daughter. The character Henry plays is cold, critical, and emotionally unavailable. A man uncomfortable expressing love, even to his own child. Jane's character spends the story trying to get through to him, trying to be seen, heard, accepted. It wasn't just a script, it was their real story. "I used the film to say things I couldn't say in real life," Jane later admitted. One moment on set caught her off guard. In a scene where Jane's character tells her father's character, "I want to be your friend," Henry's eyes filled with tears. Jane was stunned. She had never seen him cry before. It was the first and only time she saw emotion break through his lifelong reserve. "It was like watching a wall crumble," she said. After filming ended, Henry's health declined. He died in 1982, just months after winning his first and only Academy Award for On Golden Pond. He was too ill to attend the ceremony, so Jane accepted the Oscar on his behalf. "It was the closest we ever got," she said, "and I'm grateful for it." The movie gave her more than a credit. It gave her something she'd wanted her whole life, emotional closure, even if it came just in time. After Henry Fonda's death in 1982, Jane Fonda was no longer in anyone's shadow. She had closure, a career of her own, and an unmistakable voice. And that's when she truly began to use it. In the years that followed, Jane shifted her focus, not away from acting, but toward something bigger: impact. She poured herself into activism, speaking out on issues like the Vietnam War, Native American rights, environmental justice, and women's equality. She became as famous for her politics as for her films, and in some circles, even more controversial. But controversy didn't scare her. She had grown up in rooms where silence was expected. Now she chose the opposite. In 1982, she released Jane Fonda's Workout, a home fitness video that sold over 17 million copies and helped fund her political organizing. She wasn't just reinventing herself, she was using her celebrity as currency to drive change. "If I'm going to be famous, I might as well use it," she said. In the following decades, Jane balanced film roles, public activism, and personal growth. She wrote memoirs, opened up about her childhood trauma, and became a symbol not just of reinvention, but of resilience. And in her later years, she found new fame all over again, starring in the hit series Grace and Frankie, which ran from 2015 to 2022. Millions saw her not as Henry Fonda's daughter, but simply as Jane, hilarious, sharp, unfiltered, and powerful. She had become what few people in Hollywood ever truly managed to be. Not a legacy, not a label, not a daughter. A woman entirely her own. In an interview, she reflected, "It's a given that it helps. People notice you because of your name." And yet, she also said, "You do wonder if people resent you because of it, or if you were only chosen because of who your father was." That tension between access and authenticity defined the early part of her career. And for decades, she worked to prove that she wasn't just part of a Hollywood bloodline, she was something more: a truth teller, a risk taker, a builder of her own legacy. She may have entered the industry through the back gate, but she stayed because of her strength, her talent, her voice, and above all, her refusal to be silent. "We're not meant to be perfect," Jane once said. "We're meant to be whole." That's the story of Jane Fonda. Not just a Nepo baby, not just a daughter. A woman who started with privilege and built something powerful with it. Jane Fonda's story doesn't erase privilege, it reveals what can be done with it. She didn't hide the fact that she was helped. She just made sure that wasn't the end of the story. From a young girl surrounded by movie stars to a woman who redefined what a movie star could be. She turned access into activism, fame into purpose, a father's legacy into her own. And maybe that's what separates Jane Fonda from so many others in the Nepo baby conversation. She never pretended she didn't get a head start. She just ran farther with it than anyone expected. So what do you think? Can someone born into fame truly earn their place? Let us know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want more deep dives into the untold stories behind Hollywood's biggest names.